Welcome to episode 52 of the Cycling Europe podcast, or is it episode number 1 of Le Grand Tour podcast? I'm not sure whether to rename it temporarily or not. Probably not, actually. I'll just have to keep abreast of which number I've got to. So this is number 52 of the Cycling Europe podcast, and my name is Andrew Sykes, and I am in the Netherlands at the start of my big trip around, well, mainly France, but initially through the Netherlands and then Belgium, all around the coast, or ish, all around France, up into the Alps, and then down the Rhine and back to the Netherlands. Now, the reason, well, I'm standing here, I'm actually in a ferry shelter. Think of a bush shelter, but for ferries. Not that I need sheltering, it's quite a nice day. It's quite sunny outside. But I've just been to the Hook of Holland. It was a bit inconvenient to do so, a bit out of my way, 20 kilometres out of my way from where the ferry arrived from Hull yesterday, or rather this morning. But I cycled down here because basically I want to start my journey in the same place that I finish my journey, and that is the signpost at the Hook of Holland, which I found. It is kind of the end of the EuroVelo 15, the Rhine cycle route, and that's where I'm going to be hopefully finishing, well, sometime at the beginning of September. And this podcast, or this series of podcasts, will hopefully help tell the story of how I get on over the course of the next few weeks, next couple of months, as I cycle my way around Europe. So far, okay, no problems. Weather's been okay. Overnight ferry, no problems there. Met already a few nice Dutch people who've advised me on my routes and route finding, including a professor from Delft University. He was very helpful, and well, hopefully it's a sign of things to come. But this episode isn't going to be just me talking. We're also going to hear from somebody who I interviewed a few weeks ago. In fact, I did it twice. First of all, before he set off, and then when he came back. And he's actually going to a bit of France that I'll be in as of, well, hopefully later this week. His name is Julian Ralph, and I started by asking him to introduce himself.
So my name is Julian Ralph. I'm an education manager in Cheltenham, and I'm 43 years of age.
And you're planning on heading to France imminently, I think later this week. Can you explain what you're going to be doing?
Yeah, I leave on a ferry from Dover to Dunkirk on Thursday, early Thursday morning, the 2nd of June. And I'm going to be cycling for 4 days around that region of Dunkirk. So roughly 400 kilometres distance over the 4 days. And that is due to my granddad was evacuated from Dunkirk in 1940. So the initial idea of visiting that area and cycling around there started off the planning for this trip. So I planned those 4 days based on initially finding out some very basic information about what he was doing when he was out there, and it's developed from there.
Just tell us more about your grandfather. Did you know him?
Yeah, I knew him. So he passed away when I was in my sort of late teens, so just turning 20. So obviously grew up, obviously my childhood with him. So he was a very hard and fair man, but yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. But what we didn't know was any information about what he did, sort of his time in sort of in the military. He wouldn't talk about it to any of the grandkids, and hardly gave any information to my dad. So kind of worked off a very, very basic level of information initially, piecing things together from family members, and managed to get some research from the Gloucestershire Soldiers of Gloucestershire Museum. So it's kind of really contributed to developing the trip and the route.
So just to clarify, your grandfather was involved in being evacuated from Dunkirk in 1940, is that correct?
Yeah, 1940, yeah.
When you were growing up, did he ever mention it?
No, he didn't. And actually, I think my dad mentioned it a few times, and we kind of asked my dad a few questions, myself and my brother, and yeah, he just kind of, oh, your granddad won't talk about it and things. So I think my brother had asked to see his medals, and he may have seen them once or twice, but yeah, very ignorantly. I don't think we showed a lot of interest in it, because he doesn't want to talk about it, and we were probably too scared to ask him, to be brutally honest. But no, it's kind of a bit of a funny thing for our family, where we've now managed to find out more and more information, which has obviously been brilliant for us. But yeah, obviously we'd have wished at the time we maybe had sat down and had those conversations with him when he was alive. I think that would have been really cool.
You're going to be following a route which is inspired by what he did back in 1940. Can you just explain the route that you're going to be taking over the course of the 4 days that you're going to be in France?
Yeah, so as we sort of touched on, he was evacuated from Dunkirk in 1940. So initially I arrived there on Thursday morning, and then I'm going to take part of the EuroVelo 4 route. So I'm going to go west towards Calais, down the coast. And so the first day is quite a long day, and that will finish in Boulogne-sur-Mer. So that's the end of the first day. And then the second day, going to carry on going down the coast a little bit, and then come inland, and I'm going to cycle all the way down to Arras. So the first 2 days are quite long time cycling, sort of 120, 130 kilometers, I think, the first 2 days, and for each of those. And then from Arras, I'm going to come back up and hopefully pick up part of the EuroVelo 5, which then will take me back up to Saint-Omer for my third sort of day, my third stop. And then my last day is going to be visiting some villages very close to Saint-Omer, where my granddad was stationed and based with his battalion. And then I was able to trace a route back to the Bray Dunes, which would have been the route that his regiment would have marched back to, obviously, when they were being withdrawn and being evacuated. So, yeah, my first initial route was a direct cycle back to Dunkirk, but this one's obviously going to be a little bit more poignant, because I'm going to be cycling pretty much where they would have marched back, which is going to be a lovely way to finish the 4 days. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that final day.
Did his battalion, did they ever get any further than Saint-Omer? Did they? My history of that period of the Second World War isn't great. When was it the British Expeditionary Forces? Is that what they were called?
Yeah, the BEF. Yeah, that's right.
Did they ever make it any kind of distance out of the area in the Pas de Calais, or?
Well, initially when he arrived in France, his battalion were actually in Belgium. So when I started to first plan initially evacuated from Dunkirk, when I managed to get the research and the information through, he spent quite a large amount of time in Belgium, and then they gradually withdrew and were marched back and transported at various times back towards, obviously, the French border, and then into France. But that sort of area of, it was Arnec, Cassel, Ledringham, was more of a funnel, I think, for want of a better phrase, where sort of the German army had surrounded pretty much everybody then, and it was kind of let's obviously withdraw everybody back. So he was, from kind of the research and the sort of recordings and stories that I've read, they were one of the last battalions to fall back. They were quite heavily hit as well. So the fact that he and not many others survived that is pretty incredible, to be honest. And then when they were eventually obviously able to get on a boat and leave Dunkirk, their boat was actually hit. So my grandfather actually dived into the water and saved a guy from some burning sort of wreckage, and got quite badly burnt as well. Yeah, so again, he was obviously not quite finished when he managed to get to the beaches. Yeah, the research that I've got from the Soldier of Gloucestershire Museum has been absolutely fantastic. Has really helped sort of piece that final sort of part of the route together.
In terms of preparation, are you using a bike that you have had for a long time? Have you bought a new bike? Have you the kit that you're taking, the map? Have you prepared your GPS, or are you just going to wing it when you get there?
So bike wise, I bought a bike specifically for the trip. So I did a fair bit of training on my old road bike whilst waiting for my new bike to arrive. Unfortunately, it didn't arrive until sort of the early part of May. So I've not had a huge amount of time to get used to it and train on it. But having said that, it's a good bike. I'm happy with it, and I'm sure it will be fine, and it'll be a better bike than the road one I was hoping to was going to have to take. And sort of bags wise and stuff, I'm keeping it fairly light. I'm staying in B&Bs and things, so I'm not camping. So I've got a large sort of saddle bag and obviously the usual kind of front bags and things with my bike bits in and stuff. So yeah, hopefully that should be fine and that should be enough. And maps wise, I've poured over your standard maps, which I absolutely love doing. But I've downloaded the 4-day routes that I want to take, obviously knowing that there's probably going to be some deviation from those. Yeah, I feel pretty much ready to go, and I'm sure that something will be thrown up in those 4 days that I'll have to negotiate. Yeah, I think that's part of the journey and part of the adventure, I think, isn't it? To try and tackle that when it comes up.
And is there one specific or particular place or activity or something about the trip that you're particularly looking forward to? Perhaps something where you know there's a strong connection with your grandfather?
Again, I think it's that last day. As I said initially, the sort of day 4 was I was going to cycle up to Calais and get on a ferry and come home. But then through the research and talking to various people, actually finishing in Dunkirk was better, more poignant, and a lovely way to kind of round off the whole trip and being able to visit those villages. I think that's going to be the key thing for me. I think it's kind of going to build up to that, and actually knowing that my grandfather was there in 1940, which is going to be quite an emotional thing, I think, to kind of get to that point and then sort of capture that, and then obviously move on and cycle up to the beaches and stuff. And that last day, hopefully, if all goes well, I've got time to spend in that area and not just kind of get back, jump on a ferry and come home. So just changing that around a little bit. It sort of a few weeks ago has given me, I think, more time and really kind of just hopefully we'll finish off the trip. Yeah, I'm looking forward to first time cycling abroad. I'm looking forward to all of that. But I think that last day especially is going to be quite special and quite different.
More from Julian in a few minutes. Now, I've made my way further south, got off that little ferry, and for a while I was cycling through basically reclaimed industrial land on the coast south of Rotterdam. And it is, think about, I don't know where you live, but think about cycling through an industrial area where you live, and you probably have images of it being tough going. My God, that was one of the most easy, beautiful cycles I've ever experienced. Cycle paths everywhere, obviously, flat as a pancake, no potholes in the road, and beautifully signposted. Come back to that in a second. Now, the landscape hasn't changed. It's still as flat as a pancake. That's the nature of the Netherlands, isn't it? And I suspect I'm still on reclaimed land. However, this is very green and leafy, with beautiful houses just set back from the road on either side. I'm not actually on a dedicated cycle path anymore, as you might have heard a few moments ago with that car going past, but there's barely any traffic. And I'm following the system of knoppunts. Now, you may have heard of these. They're fantastic, although there is a downside I'll come to in a second. Basically, all you need to do is remember the numbers that you need to follow, the numbers of the nodes. Those are the meeting points of all the roads. So, for example, I've just been following number 1, and then it was number 3, and then it was number 4, and I'm now heading in the direction of number 13, 14, 15. They're a bit more random usually than that. Those sound quite sequential, so I don't know exactly how they work them out, but they do look a lot more random when you look at them on a map. But basically all you need to do is head for the next node and you can't go wrong. Well, famous last words, you probably can, but that's what I'm doing at the moment down this very affluent little street. Some beautiful houses here, goodness. This must be where the great and good of Rotterdam escape for the weekend. Yeah. Right, well, as I continue my cycle to Knopppunts 13, 14 and 15, perhaps that will be a good opportunity to listen to the after conversation that I had with Julian Ralph. Remember, he was planning to cycle 4 days around northern France, and in this part of the interview he explains exactly how he got on.
It was an incredible 4 days, something that I would definitely do again. Overall, I got on really well. And I think as the 4 days went on, I felt that I kind of progressed into some kind of seasoned bike tourist, just in the ways of, I don't know, packing my bag, making sure I had the right snacks. But it was an incredible experience. Yeah, and I've already started thinking about what I could do next, which is always a good thing, I think.
Can you explain how it went and what went on?
Yeah, sure. So my first day, I set out on Thursday, the 2nd of June. So that was a ferry from Dover to Dunkirk. The first day was, roughly 100 kilometres. That was my plan. Yeah, it was a very early start. So I think it was a 3 o'clock start. Rolled out of the Dunkirk port about 20 past 9 in the morning. Yeah, then it was very much on my own. So I had a couple of initial issues with my sat-nav on my phone with the route, but I managed to safely negotiate my way out onto the roads where I needed to be. And the plan for the first day was to pick up parts of the EuroVelo 4 and make my way down towards Calais and down towards Boulogne-sur-Mer. It was a very hot day and very blustery, but it was a good first day and I got into it pretty quickly. I think for me, it was more about the timings of how long I had to get to certain places. And the first day was very picturesque, obviously along the coast, which was a really nice first day. Saw a lot of people, obviously, in the different towns and places that I visited. Initially, the first part was sort of like the navigation to get me going and get me in the right direction. And then after that, it was following the signs. So once I got to Calais, the signs for EuroVelo 4 were more prominent, so it was a little bit easier to follow. So the first part of the first day was very much sort of picking up the smaller D roads and things which were lovely, and the roads are fantastic out there, and the route was great, and some lovely little villages and stuff went through. And then once I got into Calais and the other side of that, it was a little bit easier to pick up the EuroVelo 4 and obviously follow it winding along the coast down to Boulogne. So it was good.
Presumably the route from Dunkirk all the way down to Boulogne, are you very close to the coast most of the time?
Most of the time, yeah. Once got the other side of Calais and got towards Wissant, it kind of came inland a little bit, which was quite welcome at times, but because it was getting a bit battered by the wind. But then you did realise obviously how warm it was on that first day, and a great route for stopping off for breaks and snacks and stuff like that, and just to kind of capture some good video and photos and some good footage. So it was great, and there's a lovely descent into Boulogne as well, down towards the beach. I was very welcomed after a fairly long first day. I
think Boulogne is actually the place in France that I visited the most. I must have been there 15, 20 times. Ever since becoming a French teacher, I've taken hordes of kids there on day trips over many, many years. So I must have been there many, many times. And I know that descent as you go into Boulogne.
Yeah.
I've never done it on a bike, but it must be pretty good. In fact, perhaps I will do it in the next few weeks when I'm making my way around the coast.
We've got some lovely street art now on sides of buildings and things dotted around in various places. So there was a map of where you could visit those various bits of street art, but I didn't have time for that. But I managed to find sort of 4 or 5 as I just wandering around on the Thursday evening. On the Friday morning, I found a few on the side of buildings, which was very nice to see as well. So it was good.
So you stayed overnight in Boulogne, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And then you headed inland, and where was your next destination?
So, so second day, the Friday, was heading out of Boulogne, was to go to Arras. And again, it was another very warm day, but I knew that this one was a little bit longer. So about 120 kilometres was kind of what I'd planned out for my second day. So a nice climb out of Boulogne, which was most welcome the first thing in the morning. But anyway, that was fine. As I approached Étaples, I think it is, there's a military cemetery there, which is, I think it's one of the largest in France, an allied one. It was beautiful, and it was on the side of the main road, and I just stopped off there and spent some time there, which obviously tied in with the reason why I was doing that cycle trip. spent some time there, capturing some video and some good photographs and stuff. Signed a visitor's book, as I said, had a bit of a breather, and then carried on. And then it was inland then, so it was turning off the EuroVelo 4, and then it was quite a remote, peaceful cycle for the next few hours, obviously heading towards Araston.
Obviously, you went there, as we heard earlier, because of your connections with your grandfather and what he did at the start of the Second World War in terms of him being evacuated from Dunkirk. But having cycled in northern France and having travelled around northern France, it is astonishing how often you bump into the cemeteries, the monuments. Did you find yourself constantly having to keep cycling rather than stopping at every little town and village?
One of the reasons for obviously doing the trip was, it was a solo thing, and I obviously spent those 4 days on my own, and it was quite difficult at times to not stop and think, I'll take a photo of that, or that would be good. And because I was very conscious that, especially on the second day, I had a long, long way to go, a slightly later start in the morning as well. So I didn't want to waste too much time. But then, like you said, conscious that there were things that you stumbled across where I was like, I really wanted to capture that or spend some time just taking that in. And interestingly, on the second day, some navigation issues, and I was rerouted around, I guess it was a motorway for, obviously bikes are not allowed on that. So I had to negotiate going over that, which was fine. And actually led to me stumbling across another Allied cemetery in the middle of nowhere in a field. And as you said, beautifully preserved, and a really kind of powerful moment. That was, the sort of second day there. I didn't see a single soul for 20 minutes, half an hour, not a car. It was unbelievable. So the kind of a bit of fate by being misled by the sat nav took me to something like that. The second day, as I said, was a long one, and I got a little bit frustrated because I was kind of rerouted a couple of times, and I was a little bit indecisive with what I was doing around my navigation and stuff. And then the weather decided to change quite dramatically later on in the sort of late evening. So the rain started, and which was fine, and I was happy to cycle in the rain. And then it became pretty biblical. So it was a bit of a choice of, do I carry on or do I wait and sit it out in a bus shelter? And I decided to carry on because it was getting pretty dark. And I eventually rolled into my accommodation about 8:30 on that second day. So I was pretty fed up by that point. And I'm sure you've been completely soaked. Kit was wet, and it was kind of end of the second day. And I was thinking, oh, crikey, I've still got 2 days to go. So
I suppose bearing in mind that those kind of uncomfortable moments where the cycling isn't great, and in your case you get soaked to the skin, you've got to put it in the context of what your grandfather went through 70, 80 years ago in terms of the conditions that he was living in and he was traveling through, which must have been truly atrocious compared to the minor whingers of we cyclists of 2022 who kind of think, oh, it's a bit windy, it's a bit cold, it's a bit wet. It is an interesting place to put the gripes of modern day into context.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things that I started to think about. And, when you spend a lot of time on your own on a bike, your mind wanders off and thinks about things. And that was exactly my focus was, I'm getting absolutely drenched here. I've run out of food and stuff. But then, having done the research about my grandfather and his battalion, there was a couple of extracts in there where they'd marched for 24 hours with absolutely no food. I think they'd walked 30, 35 miles with absolutely nothing, and there's me thinking, well, I've got an hour and a bit to go on the bike. I'm getting absolutely soaked and I've run out of biscuits and whatever else I had left. But sort of pales into insignificance, like you said, when you think about, that was just one example of a group of sort of soldiers and stuff and what they went through. So it was a small sacrifice to make on the bike, isn't it, for a greater things that happened before us. So
when I spoke to you before, you were talking about the fourth day being the day when that was going to be the day which was going to be the most poignant in terms of revisiting his route. So at the end of the third day, did you arrive in Saint-Omer?
Yeah, so the third day was weather-wise was much better, and a fairly straightforward day. I managed to pick up part of the EuroVelo 5, so a lot of canal towpaths and stuff, which was very peaceful, very quiet. Not a huge amount of pedestrians or cyclists, actually. So that was quite nice, almost a bit of a recovery day after the night before. I managed to come through, I think it's Vimy, they got a Canadian memorial there, which somebody actually recommended that I stop at. And my route took me straight through that, which again was absolutely incredible. And I'm really glad that I managed to stop there. So they've got I think it's 27 meter high monument, an incredible thing. And they've got some underground tunnels and trenches. And I stopped there first thing in the morning and then headed off and ended up in Saint-Omer for the end of the third day. So as you said, building up then for kind of the final day, which was kind of the most poignant one for me, and obviously heading back towards Dunkirk.
So talk us through that final day then, the basically the bit where you were retracing the route of your grandfather.
I started off obviously in Saint-Omer, and I cycled for about an hour. So I was trying to retrace his steps back to two small villages. The first one was Arneck, and then there was one that was about 2 kilometres down the road, which is Ledringham. So his battalion and the Gloucesters were based at both of those on their way back towards Dunkirk. So again, I found the military cemetery at Arneck. The village itself was a standard, what you'd expect a French village. The church was now back intact because that was attacked during that time, and there were various monuments in the churchyard representing the people that lost their lives in that particular village. I then made it onto Ledringham, the church there. There was a very small Allied cemetery in the corner of the churchyard. And that was the point where kind of everything really started to hit me about, obviously, where my granddad had been there. 98% of the graves in that cemetery were Gloucester Regiment gravestones. That was the point where it was quite emotional, because that was his regiment. That was the start of that journey back towards Dunkirk. And then I retraced sort of, as you said, following the D roads across the countryside all the way back up towards Bray Dunes, which is where they were evacuated from. So the weather was pretty kind to me. I had a little bit of rain as I kind of got between those two villages, and then made it up to Bray Dunes sort of by midday. So I was able to spend some time there, had a little bit of a look around there, and then headed on in towards the centre of Dunkirk. They've got the Tour de France sign set up ready. So there's, I can't remember what stage it is now, 4 or 5. I think stage 4 or 5 is departing from there to Calais. I started to run out of time then, because I needed to obviously get back to my ferry. So I didn't get a chance to go to the museum and things, which was a shame. But I did what I wanted to do on that final day. Had a bit of a chat with my granddad on the way back from Ledringham back towards the Bray Dunes, and just sort of said that I'd been signed the visitors register and stuff. So I was happy that I managed to do that. As I said before, my original plan was to go to Calais. So I'm really glad that, on the advice of my partner, she said, why don't you go back to Dunkirk? That would be a more fitting way to end your trip. And so I'm really pleased I did that. So it was a really great last day, actually.
You mentioned there that you were having a conversation with your grandfather. So in your mind, what did he reply?
Well, interestingly, my dad sent me a text message on the morning of that Sunday. He's not a particularly emotional person, but he sent a message and said that, your granddad would be proud of what you're doing and stuff. So which was kind of, I was like, oh no, that's going to get me going. It was just a bit of an initial chat, and I just sort of said, here I am, and all this kind of stuff. And and it was kind of along the lines of sort of said, well done, and all this kind of stuff. And he probably would have said something like, I reckon you could have cycled a bit further, but tongue in cheek kind of thing. But so it was quite a nice way to finish off. And I wasn't sure if I was started to go slightly mad or was losing my mind, or it was just the tiredness and stuff that was kicking in. But it just felt like the right kind of thing to do on the way back towards Dunkirk. So felt very much at ease doing that, and then focus on, right, I need to get back now. I'm going to miss that ferry.
I think you stumbled upon one of the delights of being on the bike by yourself there, and the fact that you can have a conversation with whoever you damn well please. You can get the response, whatever you please. It's I frequently have conversations either with myself or with other people when I'm cycling, and I think the logical person for you to have a conversation with when you were cycling through northern France, especially in that final day to Dunkirk, was clearly your grandfather. He would have been touched that you'd done it, but I think he would also probably have been delighted that you're able to do it in the way that we're now able to travel through these places, basically with safety and security, without actually being shelled or the risk of losing our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that kind of thing was sort of going through my mind. And like you said before, when you visit those monuments and the various cemeteries, and again, you stumble across them in the most random of places and so quiet and peaceful. And I think they're absolutely beautiful and they're so immaculate. You almost have to, you have to almost be there and visit them. I was sort of sending photos and videos to people, and they were like, "Oh, that's incredible." I was like, "Yeah, but you need to be here. You just don't understand. There's something about these places that you actually have to visit them to really get a true kind of feeling of it." And I don't think that sort of what I did over those 4 days and has really quite sunk in yet. Talking to people since I was back into work on the Monday, so kind of the adrenaline was still pumping, and so the first couple of days and talking to people, and again, I think I touched on before that people sort of said, "Oh, well, what about your support team?" I was like, there was nobody. I was on my own, and I think I downplayed it a little bit, kind of like, "Oh, it's 4 days," and kind of thing. But yeah, I think I need to spend a bit of time just sitting back and reflecting on what happened and sort of collating everything that I did in those 4 days. There are other things that one of my cleats broke on the third day. My left cleat snapped, so I ended up with kind of one shoe. I broke a tooth, and just the random stuff like that happened, which was all fine. But it's just little things that you kind of sit back and think, "Oh, well, it's just one of those things." But a fair bit happened in 4 days, which I suppose is part of the adventure, isn't it? And the journey that you hope to have when you set your mind to doing something like that.
Have you got any other trips on the horizon? Anything else you'd like to do?
Not at the moment. I was thinking on the on the ferry on the way back. I don't know. I think, as I said, I'll sit back and reflect on what happened and where I might like to go next. I would definitely. I've already started speaking to people saying, if you haven't done it, you should, just hop on the ferry and get over to France and, have a cycle. That's a good starting place, And I'm really pleased that was my kind of starting point to cycling outside of England and the UK anyway for now. But a couple of years ago I started looking at the Atlantic Way, and I quite liked the sound of that. But I've got 2 kids and a young family, so that would be a longer period of time. So whether there's a way of incorporating a family holiday, should we say, within that, where I could get some cycling, I think that might be the next one. So I would have a support team next time at the other end, and it wouldn't just be me. So maybe that's the next one, but I'll have to think about it.
Plenty of people take their kids with them, so you wouldn't be the first there.
And there were a few people especially on EuroVelo 4, there were a few people with their bikes and the kids in the trailers in the back with the panniers and stuff. So people were doing it with the kids and all. And obviously I was going solo. So it's not impossible, is it, nowadays? So we'll see. But there'll definitely be another one at some point, because I've got the bug now, so that's good news.
Thank you to Julian Ralph for recording that a couple of weeks ago. He asked me to say that he's actually raising money, or he was raising money, for the Soldiers of Gloucestershire Museum, and I'm sure if you do a Google of his name and that, it will send you in the right direction. But thanks to Julian. I'm going to be heading in that direction very soon. In fact, I'll be in Dunkirk, I would have thought, by, what day is it today? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Wednesday or Thursday of this week perhaps, but more of that later. As you may have guessed, despite what I said earlier, I haven't published this on the Sunday evening. Yesterday was my first day of the journey, so it was all a bit kind of busy and hectic. But I will try and get it published today. I've got a bit more time, and I'm not actually cycling that far today. I'm only cycling to, initially a place called Mittelberg, I think it's called, Mittelberg, one of the two, and then Vlissingen, again, can't remember what it's called exactly without looking at the map, which is on the coast, and I'll be taking a ferry from there tomorrow morning. I've got some accommodation sorted in or near the ferry tonight. Just picking up on something that I said earlier about the Knoop points. Knoop punts. I'm clearly never going to be fluent in Dutch. I did say that they're, you can't go wrong. Well, you can occasionally go wrong if you miss the numbers. And the other downside about them, and I think I did reference this but never told you what it was, the downside of using the system is that you don't tend to know where you are, because you're constantly looking at numbers rather than the names of towns and villages. talking of towns and villages, I've still to pass a shop which is open, or a cafe, anywhere basically where I can buy myself breakfast. It's probably now about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not just talking about today, I'm talking about yesterday as well. Yesterday, hey, middle of industrial Rotterdam, certainly for the first half of the day, and then very rural areas the second half of the day. And it was Sunday, but today's Monday morning and I still haven't found anything. And I could really do with a coffee and a croissant or some other pastry to keep me going. I've actually paused at I think it's just a garden eating area. The title of the work of art, I think it's a work of art, consists of 2 cube blocks of concrete on either end of a circle, and round the circle there are 10 kind of sitting benches which are made out of slabs of rock, rectangular ones this time. It's called the 10 Commandments, and there are 10 benches upon which to sit. Don't know what the relevance is of the 10 Commandments, but there we go. Anyway, right, my next plan is to get to Mittelberg. Hopefully before I get there I will also have managed to find myself some breakfast. And as I speak I can see in the distance 3 touring cyclists. I am not alone. I think I may finally have found my breakfast. I think I found a supermarket. Ooh, coffee machines, right. How does this work? Is there a cash machine here?
Yeah, there's a
Can I
cash
pay
machine.
cash?
Yeah,
Okay,
there's a cash machine over here.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Why is life so complicated? Didn't take Visa, but there is a cash machine. Just take your card. And hopefully... Yay! Oh, great. 2 €50 notes. Fantastic. They sell croissant. Oh, they've got bread. So that's it for episode 52 of the Cycling Europe podcast, this first episode of the Le Grand Tour podcast. And, well, I've now arrived in Vlissingen, which is on the coast of one of the bits that stick out of the coast of the Netherlands. Can't think of any more or any better technical way to put it than that, I'm afraid. Tonight I'm staying at a Vrienden op de Fiets house, which means basically it's a bit like warm showers, but you pay for it. You pay €22.50. Never done that before, so it'll be an interesting experience. It is a Dutch thing, although it now has spread to many countries, certainly throughout Europe, so it may not be the last time I use the system, but I'm going to head down there in a few minutes. Vlissingen is relatively modern compared to beautiful Mittelberg, which is it Mittelberg? No, it's not Mittelberg, it's Middelburg, Middelburg, that I visited this afternoon. That really was beautiful, and I know this part of the world suffered quite badly during the war, so I'm guessing that Middelburg was probably heavily reconstructed, but they've done a bloody good job because it's beautiful. Vlissingen is a perfectly nice place, got a nice harbour. There's an arsenal in front of me which looks a bit disused, and there's a museum dedicated to the war and what went on here. I'm not going to be staying here very long, overnight stay with the people in the house where I'm staying, and then tomorrow morning I'm catching another ferry which will take me to the last bit of the Netherlands, and then finally, well, I say finally, I'm barely at the start of this journey, and then into Belgium for a day and a bit of cycling along the Belgium coast, staying at Ostend. But you're going to have to wait for all that, because that will be in the next episode. Now, I'll aim to make one of these podcasts about once every week. A bit difficult actually guaranteeing a time, but I'm aiming for perhaps every weekend. This one's a bit late, and really has been a bit different, because a lot of this podcast has been made up of listening to the interesting story of Julian and his trip to France, which is where I'm going to be going in a few days' time. Remember, if you want to get in touch, you can do so by, all the contact details are at cyclingeurope.org /contacts, and if you'd like to make a contribution, then you can go to cyclingeurope.org /support. So that's it. Oh, and a thank you to Rob Ainsley again, because he's provided the music to these podcasts, and it's his music you heard at the beginning and his music that you're about to hear at the very end. So thank you for listening, and I shall hopefully see you, or you'll hear me, might not see me unless you follow me online, at the beginning of episode 53 of the Cycling Europe podcast, which should hopefully tell you the story of how I've got on in Belgium and the first bit of northern France. So until then, thanks for listening and happy cycling.